Looking at the Markets with David Modell.
Hello and welcome to Looking at the Markets with David Modell. I am a fan of the kinds of stocks that I see having huge potential gains, especially if the price has come down to the buy zone, as I call it. Histogen, a game changer for the regenerative medicine market. And so Richard Pascoe, CEO and Director of Histogen, welcome to Looking at the Markets, sir.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and if people are interested in Histogen, I recommend they check out histogen.com. I will put the link in the description below this video, and on the NASDAQ exchange, it is ticker symbol HSTO. And, you know, I am familiar with the company. I've been watching Histogen for a while. The proprietary technology has so many applications and product opportunities, from hair regrowth to skin care, therapeutics, including orthopedics and wound healing. First of all, can you tell me what that technology is, and how can one technology have so many different uses?
Yeah, so a great place to start. So our technology and our platform is unique. It was based upon a discovery that our founder, Dr. Gail Naughton, made back in the earlier part of the 2000s, where if you take human skin cells, fibroblasts, and you suspend those skin cells on beads in a solution, and then you grow them in a bioreactor under hypoxic conditions or low oxygen conditions, it yields certain growth factors and proteins that we can then formulate and put into various products to address different conditions. So for example, one of the materials that comes out of this process, and again, it's proprietary and patent protected, is a material called cell conditioned media. It's a liquid form. It contains several growth factors and soluble proteins that, when injected into tissue, really stimulate stem cell activation. And when you activate stem cells in a person's body and tissue, it begins that healing, that regenerative process. So that particular form of our product, CCM, or cell conditioned media, is the key ingredient in our HST-001 hair growth product. The other side of this process that we run in this bioreactor I just described yields another component called human extracellular matrix, or ECM for short. And ECM is more of the insoluble proteins that result from this process that we then use and formulate into soft tissue applications, such as cartilage repair. We have a program that we hope to kick off in the clinic here soon, HST-003, which is designed to target defects, injury in knee cartilage. So the underlying technology is very novel in the sense that it's based upon a discovery that when you grow these skin cells under these conditions, you can generate these growth factors and proteins, and it, as I said, has multiple applications. Moreover, we're not a cellular therapy, so there are no cells in our final product. It's just these rich growth factors and proteins. And when those are then used towards any number of applications, you mentioned a few, we have others that we think are interesting, like spinal disc regeneration as an example. You're able to stimulate the body's own response to healing.
Yeah, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more. I found HST-003 to be a fascinating technology there. The ability to regenerate mature cartilage and vascularized, well-vascularized bone. You mentioned sports medicine applications. I'm also seeing spinal disc repair, orthopedic, even dental possible applications. Can we explore that a little bit?
Sure. So right now we're focused really in two areas with our technology. One's on the aesthetic side. I mentioned hair growth, for example. We also have an existing partnership in place with Allergan, now part of AbbVie. Allergan uses our growth factors. We have a licensing arrangement with them. They use our growth factors that we produce in one of their skincare lines that's sold through their sales force to dermatologists and plastic surgeons, cosmetic surgeons. So that's one application. On the orthopedic side, we have our lead there being HST003. And again, utilizing this ECM material that comes out of our platform with the goal of repairing tears, defects in cartilage that's driven primarily by injury, trauma, some sort of related type of cause. So we're not really all that focused in the area of degenerative disease right now, meaning where, over time, as your joints wear out, so to speak, that is an option that we can pursue down the road. But with respect to this particular program, we're going after that sort of acute injury type of patient. Multiple applications there. You can imagine one of the things we're proud of is that we're able, I should say, to partner with and receive funding from the Department of Defense for this program, because the military has, and the DoD in particular, has a keen interest in products that could potentially help get servicemen and women who are injured back into restorative health and back into action, so to speak. I served in the Army myself for several years. I know that injury is just a part of life in the military. So we're very pleased to be able to partner with the DoD on that program. And in fact, one of our chosen clinical sites for a trial we expect to kick off here shortly is Walter Reed Medical Center out of Washington, D.C., which of course is the United States Army's sort of preeminent hospital medical facility.
Histogen is preparing to plan phase 1 and 2 clinical trials of HST003. There was a news item that the U.S. FDA, Food and Drug Administration, did notify verbally Histogen that it has questions and that there was a clinical hold, but I personally don't see that as a big roadblock or obstacle to the progress. Could you address that, please?
Certainly. So as some of your listeners may know, every product that you want to conduct clinical trials with in humans must undergo certain regulatory approvals along the way, not just final approval, but the initial approval, which is typically in the form of filing a investigational new drug application, or IND, which is what we did back in December. That process allows the FDA to review what you have done to date from a preclinical perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, and the like, and then provide you with a clearance, if you will, to proceed into human clinical trials. As you noted, about a week or so ago, we received a verbal notification from the FDA that there were some additional questions they had about some of the manufacturing related process, and more specifically, some documentation that they asked us to provide with respect to some of that process that we undergo to manufacture our product. So we believe by addressing those issues here promptly, we should be in a position to clear that hurdle, get approval from the FDA, and start our phase 1/2 trial here in the U.S. shortly thereafter.
Absolutely. And I don't want the whole interview to be about one product, HST003, although that's one that I'm really excited about. Just wanted to address some of the other ones that I'm seeing here. For example, CCM Cosmetics, partnering with Allergan, as you mentioned, and that's
Correct.
not even in the clinical trials. That's already marketed. Can you tell me about the progress with that?
Yeah, so the company was started, by Dr. Naughton back in the early 2000s, and part of the initial focus for the company was in this cosmetic arena. We know by using these growth factors in certain formulations, creams, topicals, if you will, that we can have a beneficial effect on skin, reversing the signs of aging, things like wrinkles and fine lines, being treated. And so through that work, we were able to establish a partnership with Allergan several years ago, as I noted earlier, where Allergan essentially buys from us these growth factors, this out of our process, the CCM material I referenced earlier, and they market those growth factors in a specific formulation under their Skin Medica brand. And so that's a well-established partnership relationship. To date, we've taken in over $22 million of non-dilutive capital through that partnership. We've sell product to them, which generates revenue for the company as well. So that's what we think of as a nice opportunity, not only to validate our technology, but to actually see it in the market. So, of course, behind that, we've shifted our attention more towards the clinic and working on products like 01, 03, and others that can, hopefully demonstrate safety and efficacy in a clinical setting, and potentially be opportunities for us to partner out at some point in the future.
And I imagine, tell me if I'm right about this partnership would allow Histogen some access to the massive resources of Allergan and therefore AbbVie. Would that be accurate?
Well, I think it's the relationship with Allergan and AbbVie now is really more of we're providing them our growth factors for use in their product, which they commercialize, and in return we get a financial benefit from that. So I think it's more of a traditional licensing type of framework. Having said that, as you and many of your listeners probably know, this is a small world that we live in here within the sort of biotech arena, and especially in some of these therapeutic areas like aesthetics. And so to the extent that we can forge and maintain relationships with companies like Allergan as an example, and be able to potentially look to them to partner other assets of ours in the future, whether it's Allergan or other companies, is really part of our strategy. We are very much a research and development organization with a proprietary technology that we think has value across the spectrum of therapeutic areas, aesthetics, orthopedics as two examples, and that for us to really drive value for our shareholders is to take those products into the clinic, demonstrate their usefulness, and then look to find a commercial partner for them for broad distribution. So I think the Allergan relationship is just a good example of how we've already done that. We'd like to continue to replicate that.
Yeah, definitely value added for shareholders. And this stock, HTS, so it is so cheap right now. It's, I believe, underappreciated, under the radar, and undervalued, as I like to say. Now, speaking of partnerships, there's another one that's value added in terms of HST001, the hair growth proprietary formula in development. I believe that Histogen has a partnership with a company that's located in China. Can you tell me about that?
Correct. So that company is called Huapont Pharmaceuticals, Haupont. They're a large multi-billion-dollar pharma company out of China that has an interest, of course, in the aesthetics field, specifically in hair loss, hair growth. Several years ago, our company partnered the rights to HST001 to Huapont for the China market and the China market only. So we retain rights to the asset throughout the world, with the exception of China, just to be clear. That partnership, of course, brought funding to the company when we were private. The Huapont organization, or a subsidiary, I should say, of Huapont, continues to be a large shareholder within the Histogen cap table. So they've been a supporter of ours for several years as investors and continue to do so. And the way that partnership is structured is that at a certain point, when we are through development at a certain stage in the U.S., we'll then do a handoff, if you will, to them for their purposes of pursuing approval in China. So the goal there is to work on our side to get HST001 advanced in the clinic, which we're doing, and should it be demonstrate safety and efficacy to a level that it can go into later stage clinical trials, we'll look to do that on our side. But with respect to the Huapont relationship, they'll then pick up responsibility for doing the same in China. So they have responsibility to manage the product in China, both clinically and commercially, and we'll of course be supporting them with our expertise and knowledge along the way. And in return, there are certain milestones and other financial returns that would be due back to us, which we think can be quite valuable in terms of funding the company through non-dilutive sources, but also, again, validating the technology and creating, an enhanced opportunity for our shareholders.
Sure. Now, I do want to clarify something. This is not a company. Histogen is not directly involved in embryonic stem cells. So anybody with concerns about that should rest assured. I believe there are certain advantages of not getting into that area. Could you clarify that for everybody a little bit?
Certainly. So our technology does rely upon skin cells, human skin cells that come out of a master cell bank that we maintain. to as sort of the starter ingredient, if you will, for this process I described. However, once we complete that process and we harvest the material and we process that material, there are no remnants of any cellular activity whatsoever. Our products are essentially pure proteins and growth factors, which are not cellular components to them. And to your point raised, clearly we have really nothing to do with embryonic stem cells or anything within that arena. Our product, as I said, is human derived, but the final product does not have any sort of human material remaining in it beyond the growth factors and proteins that are produced.
Yeah. So I just want to ask, literally and figuratively, what is coming down the pipeline for Histogen?
So, we're working very diligently on a couple of things right now. Obviously, our HST-001 hair growth trial is still underway. We expect to have results from that study sometime in the first quarter of this year. So that'll be an opportunity for us to evaluate the safety and efficacy of that product. Moreover, as I mentioned before, HST-003, the knee cartilage repair, we anticipate getting into a clinical trial here shortly once we clear the FDA hurdle on the IND. That trial will run approximately a year or so, so we should have data, sometime in the early part of 2022. We also have a product that does not rely upon our technology. It's actually an asset that we picked up as part of a merger we did last year with a company called Canatus. Canatus was a public company. We were private. We did a reverse merger to go public with that through that transaction. And as a consequence, we not only got public and were able to fund our operations with some of the cash that Canatus brought to the table, but they also had a few assets in their portfolio that we now own, one of which is called Embryonic. It's a small molecule caspase inhibitor, which we are on the cusp of going into the clinic with as a potential COVID-19 therapeutic. Embryonic is a drug that's been studied in liver disease, so there's a lot of experience in a human population with it already from a safety standpoint. If you think about a condition such as COVID or maybe other related conditions like SARS, MERS, for example, caspase activation is a pathway that sort of leads to these inflammatory symptoms that people get when they're present with COVID. And so the idea here with Embryonic, because it's a caspase inhibitor, blocks caspase activity, we can get that drug on board in patients who have COVID, who are symptomatic but are not hospitalized, and be able to mitigate the symptoms. So the way I like to describe Embryonic is sort of like Tamiflu in the influenza condition, where you are diagnosed with the flu, you start to have symptoms, you get Tamiflu on board kind of early in the process to try to dampen the symptoms, shorten the duration of the condition, and hopefully get people back to restorative health sooner than had they not taken it. So we're looking at Embryonic in a very similar fashion. There's a study that we have teed up. We have FDA approval to conduct. We'll be doing it in New York City, where there's a large patient population. And we'll be evaluating Embryonic versus placebo in a COVID population. That study will get started this quarter, and it's a short study, about 14-day evaluation period. We should have data from the Embryonic study in the second quarter of this year. So HST-001 in hair, we're winding down our clinical study there, our first clinical study. 03, we're standing that study up with FDA approval. We'll get in the clinic with it here shortly, and Embryonic in a similar vein, get it started in the first quarter, data in the second quarter. And then behind that, we have some pre-IND, some preclinical programs that we like to push forward. For example, the 04, which is a spinal disc regeneration product, where essentially you would look to treat disc that have been affected through injury or some other type of acute circumstance, and be able to restore that disc to health and do things like alleviate pain, enhance mobility, and the like. So a lot on the table, a lot on the plate. We look forward to continuing to move them all forward.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Here's what I see: strategic partnerships, technology with so many applications, and a stock that doesn't really reflect the incredible potential of this innovative company, Histogen. I've been speaking with Mr. Richard Pascoe, the CEO and director. Again, if you're interested, I want you to go to histogen.com. Link is in the description below this video. If you're interested in the stock, on the NASDAQ right now, HSTO is the ticker symbol. Mr. Pascoe, we're going to have you back on looking at the markets very soon, especially when there's another breakthrough or milestone in Histogen. So thank you for coming on, sir. I appreciate it today.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure.